As new Descendants get added to the game with harder content being released, it's no surprise that gun builds were starting to suffer. Now fortunately, with the latest update brought a new system to help us push that power level of weaponry to new heights, allowing us to tinker with stats to improve their lethality, or even make them fun pieces of utility, increasing our speed or allowing us early access into Insomniac's Spider-Man 3 via reduced grapple hook charge times. In today's video we'll be looking at my current build for the fan favourite unique weapon, the thundercage. We'll cover all the important pieces that you need to tackle to even purge runs at level 20, from modules to cores. You won't want to miss this. So kick back, let's take a look at what makes the thundercage shockingly good. So let's start talking about the unique ability. You probably already know this because the thundercage has been out since the game first launched, but let's start talking about what actually is so good about this. It is really as simple as when defeating an enemy, the defeated enemy has a set chance to discharge electric shockwave, which deals additional damage to nearby enemies. This is 100% if you manage to get this up to 4 ranks, which you should absolutely be doing with every single unique weapon. This does have a damage radius of 5 meters, and on top of that the additional damage is your firearm damage times 200%. This allows you to be able to scale quite nicely, especially since with this build that we're going to be building into firearm attack as well as an elemental attack, so you will see some quite nasty numbers. Essentially how this one works is that this just kind of softens up the enemies that are nearby. This is why it's fantastic as a mobbing weapon, because you can just go in, you can start absolutely lasering an elite, or you can just start soften them up with tackling some of the trash mobs, and then the electric shockwave will then help to be able to deal with the remaining enemies that exist in that area. Now there are ways that we're going to be enhancing that even further through mobbing, but that will be a separate build video for another time. But to be able to get the most out of the thundercage, we will be essentially building into firearm attack so that we can then do all that nice AoE. Now looking at the stats side of things, the firearm attack is kind of middling, it's not too fancy, but obviously this is just base, so this is something that we will be looking to increase even further with modules. Fire rate is just kind of like standard, but it is that double number of 666. The rounds per magazine is okay, but it is definitely worth investing into to be able to get the more out of this, so you can actually hold down that trigger and really just enjoy being able to blast some enemies. But it does have a fantastic firearm critical hit rate, a base of 20%, and then it does have a really good firearm critical hit damage as well. So this is definitely going to be one of those weapons that benefits from going into crit. Unfortunately, because it is a general rounds, we definitely have the modules to help out. Speaking of modules, let's head over to that screen. So this is the build that I'm going to have right in front of you. This is one that I've tried and tested, and this one absolutely blasts its way through purge runs at level 20. The main kind of focuses that we are going with here is we're looking to enhance the unique ability of this. The best way to do that is by increasing firearm attack. This is going to be done by rifling reinforcements as well as action and reaction. And we do also have the special mod, which is going to be sweeping squad, which every single time you defeat an enemy, at 100% chance of being able to get an extra 10.6% base firearm attack. And you can stack this up to 3 times, so this will go up to 31.8%. So this is a really nice way of being able to increase that, kind of like the shockwave, but there are ways that we can use that to be able to then filter into extra damage elements, and that's why we are going into an electric enhancement. Now the reason why you want to go into electric enhancement, especially for purge runs, is because at level 20 you will be facing the certain type of enemies, and they are weak to electric elements, so you get more of a damage bonus by going into this. So we do enhance this even further by using our seasonal reinforcements, which we'll have a look at in a little bit. But on top of that, we are also grabbing electric priority, which then increases the electric attack that we've managed to grab here and gives it an extra 50% on top of that. So you can see as to how we're all kind of like building into this. We're going into base attack, and then on top of that we're building into extra elements, which then using the resistances and everything like that, we're doing some really nice damage on top of that. We did also mention being able to go into crit, so we are grabbing better insight, which is going to help us with that critical hit rate. We are going to grab better concentration combined with concentration priority, and this is going to give us a really nice increase to the amount of critical hit damage that we're going to be doing. So with all those mods just currently equipped, before we talk about the last couple of mods, we do have a 5.896 multiplier for our critical hit damage, and that is going to be combining both of our standard firearm attack, and it's also going to help with the electric side of things, because once you crit with your standard side, your standard firearm, you're then also going to crit with the element as well. So it's going to be a really nice damage number that pops up every single time you crit. Now, we also have an expand weapon charge to help us out with rounds per magazine, so this is going to help us so we can just hold down that trigger for longer. And on top of that, we also have weak point sight, because this does seem to be the best one to be able to kind of go into with the last one of our slots. Now, there is an argument that could be made for being if you manage to sort out going into weak point damage, if you can actually control the recon, you can just absolutely laser them. Ultra Precision Strike is definitely worth a slot in here, and it's going to be the exact same catalyst side of things, same socket, so you could absolutely benefit from that. Same with Overwhelm. If you manage to sort out the advantage affinity, if you do match it with the elements that you're going to be going into, then this definitely could be a great slot in as well. But Essentially, weak point sight is just a nice consistent, you don't have to worry too much about it, but those are also great shouts. Now, there is one other thing that is definitely worth a consideration, that's going to be electric circulation. The only downside to electric circulation is, while it is a fantastic boost in the amount of DPS you will be chucking out, just keep in mind it does require being able to get some electrocution off. As far as I'm aware, the unique ability doesn't trigger electrocution from enemies that survive that attack, and you also only have a base of 4% as your attribute status trigger effect rate, so you won't be activating this very often. So therefore, because there's no consistent way of being able to get this up, unlike being able to get burned with Blair, it just doesn't make the most sense to me. So that's the reason why I've kind of avoided being able to go into that one. Now, to wrap up the rest of the build before we start talking about who it's best to be able to use with, and also being able to talk about seasonal enhancements, we can now also talk about the core side of things. Now, if you manage to get a core binder and you do use it on the thundercage, this is going to be the rest of the build that's going to then combine with this to then use in level 20 purge runs. This is what makes it so strong. Being able to talk about a couple of these selections right here, going into recoil is a fantastic thing for precision, because while you do have some really good shouts here, hipfire just was a bit awkward for me to be able to use. Even though it is an SMG, it made more sense for me to be able to aim down sights because the camera just kind of like wiggled left, right and center. It was just a little awkward to be able to land all the shots that I needed. Aim shot accuracy is really good, but just keep in mind that if you don't do anything with the recoil, then this will expand over time. So therefore, aim shot is nice to be combined with recoil, but personally I do think that recoil is going to be best in slot here. You could make an argument if you wanted to be able to be an absolute speed monster, then you could go for sprint speed or grapple hook charge time. By all means, go for something like that. But if you are looking to be able to use the thundercage as an actual weapon, and with the Descendant that I'm going to suggest in a second, then recoil is going to be the place to be able to go, and I do recommend that you do manage to slot one of those in. On top of that, we'd also have tactical augmentation, which is going to be rounds per magazine. I do think this is the best in slot. Obviously, things like reload and fire rate are decent. Attribute status effect trigger rate will only go off your base, so therefore it's just not worth it. So therefore, going into rounds per magazine is just going to give you more bang for your buck, and it just allows you to be able to fire out a bunch of bullets. Critical hit damage on your hit augmentation is definitely going to be best in slot. We already have some decent fire hit rate. If you are going for a generic kind of use for this, if you're looking to be able to use it for a different Descendant than what I'm about to suggest, any of the crit-based Descendants, then in that case, critical hit rate is definitely worth a slot in here. That will definitely help you out. That can go up to 24%, which is going to be roughly an extra 5% hit chance, just as base, before you then start factoring in everything else that exists in your modules. But critical hit damage is going to help you be able to absolutely blast your way through all those enemies, so I definitely recommend being able to get that one. And then your last two slots are going to be where your extra damage is going to start coming in. So in this case, firepower augmentation. Firearm attack is definitely the only one that's worthwhile, because the thundercage is not really typically a Colossus fighting weapon, so therefore firearm attack makes the most sense. That's also going to increase your unique ability as well for that extra ring and that extra AoE. And then on top of that, your free augmentation, while you might think that going for an extra roll into firearm attack is going to be the best, in actual fact, because we've gone into electric circulation, it's going to make more sense to go into going into the attribute augmentation cores, and because you can get such a high multiplier on this, it allows you to be able to do a massive amount of damage. I'm not kidding you, this is kind of crazy, especially once you do match the element to the enemies that you're going to be going up against. So in this case, because we are using electric, this is a huge amount that we can actually chuck in. So if I do back out all of this and then go into this section here, which then shows us all the stats that we need, you can see before we've managed to go into our artifact into our reinforcement, you can see as to what base stats we're currently sitting at. So we have a huge critical hit damage multiplier, and every single one of these stats, which is the electric attack, is almost there to be able to be an exact copy of 100% to your firearm attack. It's just going to stack up massively. So that's why the reason why we go into electric attack, because you get more of a benefit than going into firearm attack. Now, as for best Descendants to be able to use in combination with the thundercage, personally I think that Haley and Blair are going to be the best ones to be able to go for, because these are massively strong crit builds. You could make an argument for Enzo, but because of how fast you're going through magazines, you're not necessarily going to be able to regen your ability for your extra critical damage or critical hit rate. It just doesn't make the most sense. I mean, Valby with Supply Moisture is not a bad shout. It's just a little bit awkward to be able to go if you're using it on water and all that. But personally, I found that the best was going to be Haley. just being able to activate your skill 3 so that you constantly have that extra critical hit rate and extra critical hit damage. You absolutely just mow through enemies. They will come to you, you deal with this, you do your AoE, it softens them up ready for the next one. I will be doing a build video covering this a little bit. I've already done one for my mobbing Haley side of things, if you want to go check one of those out, but I will be doing an updated guide coming out soon. But essentially, combine your thundercage with your Polar Knight set and combine that with the cryogenic cluster shot. This will essentially turn you into, so you have several forms of AoE damage, and that means that you're just kind of like stacking up on what the thundercage is best at doing, and it just kind of like makes it so much better. So yeah, if you are going into Purge 20s, any of the harder content that requires mobbing side of guns, then this is going to be the best kind of setup that I could personally recommend to you. So that allows us to be able to finish off with the Inversion Reinforcement, and the only thing that you should be focusing on is this attribute row. The best one is to always match it to the elements that you're going to be using. In this case, we are going to be using electric, so therefore electric focus rounds is the way to be able to go for this. The waste key every single time you fire 5 bullets, and you will constantly have this up if you are going into purge runs and everything like that. You will essentially get 5 stacks of 4.8% of your firearm attack, so you will be getting an extra 24% electric attack into from your firearm into your electric attack. And then that benefits from all the electric priority that we've already got onto the build. It then benefits from the electric attack roll that we've managed to get from our cores. Essentially is this, it's massive amounts of free damage, and this is the best way that you should probably be rolling into that. You could make an argument for extra survivability of going into antibody explosion for your build, but in terms of like actually talking about the thundercage and the amount of damage it's going to be doing, electric focus rounds is the only thing that you should be worrying about. And with all that out of the way, that wraps up on the video for my recommended thundercage build. I admit, I never really cared for the thundercage for a long time, but now that I've spent some time with it and seen the devastation that it chucks out, I feel I owe it an apology for gathering dust in the storage box on legs. But this is the section I want to hear from you. How are you finding Season 2 so far? Are you using any other Descendants than Inez right now? And lastly, which weapon would you like to see next with these core unlock builds? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video, and as I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and see you all on our next video.